Hello, my name is SaraGrace Lamb. Before we start, I'd like you to all to try and pretend something. Imagine your child, or if you are a kid like me, you have grown up with so many friends, but your best friend is always over. This best friend has become so close with everyone in the family, and you're pretty sure your dog loves them more than they love you. They're a great influence because they're kind. Now, imagine one time they show up with a huge bruise, or they constantly seem hungry and tired, or they're constantly nervous to open up about anything. You ask why, but you know why. You've noticed their mom is drinking more and more, or their dad has some drug charges. They could be 5 years old or 17. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that they are not safe. They don't smile anymore. This friend that you love more than life is living with an addict. I am in 10th grade and go to Roosevelt High School. I took a course via edx.org at HarvardX called Child Protection, Children's Rights in Theory and Practice. This course took about 2 months and consisted of 4 parts, which were every child's right to protection, violence against children, children in the law, and a systems approach to child protection. I took it one day at a time, trying to highlight the most important information each day, even though I felt as though I rewrote every sentence I learned. My course covered all sorts of different reasons children need protecting and how to provide it to them, but I will be focusing on the protection they need from parents who suffer from addiction. I've also researched the psychological impacts addict parents have on their children. I care about children and the negative impacts family addicts have on their physical and mental health. Here are some guidelines to help children impacted by family addiction. There are many approaches to child protection, but to do that, one must be able to identify what they're protecting the child from: violence, or, in this case, parents with addiction. A successful child protection system involves considering the child and their right to be heard, child participation, and child rights forums. Child rights forums are clubs formed outside of school by children to come together and address their issues and concerns to the authorities. An inclusive child protection system ensures child participation before programs are designed, talks to children about what the program should consist of, and includes children in leadership, positions, and decisions. Child participation should be early, ongoing, and diverse. According to Laura Lander, the most beneficial way to help children who live with addict parents is to see how the child relationships fit into the family systems theory. The family systems theory focuses on how the parts of a system interact with one another. It is built upon multiple models of family therapy that have developed, whether they are strategic, structural, experiential, or multisystemic. These outlooks vary from case to case, yet all the family therapy models share the same basic principle of the family systems theory. The parent cannot be fully understood or successfully treated without first understanding how that parent functions in his or her family system. This concept refers to homeostasis, which is the tendency of a system to seek stability and equilibrium. Each family member, spouse, child, or addict, tends to function in the way that keeps the whole system in balance, even if it is not healthy. For example, doing the dishes is an everyday task that must be done. Take a family of 4, 2 parents and 2 children. Parent 1 does the dishes Monday. Child 1 does the dishes Tuesday. Child 2 does the dishes Wednesday. And parent 2 does the dishes Thursday. The cycle then repeats. This is a healthy, balanced course where each family member is giving as much as they take. However, take that same family and say parent 1 is no longer able to do the dishes Monday night. They're an addict. But that's not all. Changing a pattern in a sudden, traumatic way, as addict parents often do, makes the transition much harder for the rest of the family. Child 1 is in their late teens, so they start picking up Parent 1's dish duties. But Parent 1 has also stopped doing their laundry, or taking the kids to school, or even functioning at their work. Parent 2 then has to provide for all 4 family members, so Child 1 must pick up the chores. Without meaning to, this family has further enabled Parent 1 to continue their harmful habits. Enabling is a form of accommodation that protects the parent with the addiction from fully experiencing the consequences of his or her substance abuse. Not only will these families' schedules deteriorate, but the relationships will also shift and deviate. Parent-child attachments form as soon as the child recognizes their primary caregivers, and this is one of the few situations where the age and the maturity of the child will not stop these relationships from growing. This is where the term feedback generally pops up in studies on parental addicts, and that is because the word pertains to the circular way in which parts of a system communicate with each other. So, basically, how who responds to who. One more word is generally associated with the family systems theory, and this key phrase that cannot be understated is boundaries. Boundaries define internal and external limits of a system and are established to conserve energy by creating a protective barrier around a system. In the child protection spectrum, the term most often refers to the child-parent relationship. These boundaries, or often lack thereof, often lead to attachment disorders. These attachment disorders can never be fully treated because they are mental health issues, just like physical health problems may be better some days and worse on others. However, providing stability and support for the children that were neglected or abused by the parents will never do more harm than good. The disorders can stem from neglect, abuse, or alcohol-related deficits in cognitive and social-emotional functioning. When a mother is consuming alcohol or drugs while pregnant, it will do great harm to her infant. There will be early damage to the growing fetus, which could result in, but is not limited to, birth defects, fetal alcohol syndrome, and fetal alcohol effects. The impact of an addict parent on an adolescent is much different, though. The most common effects seen in these children are depression, anxiety, substance abuse, opposition, conduct problems, anger outbursts, aggression, or impulsivity. Most of these issues can be treated through therapy, medication, and providing a safe and stable environment to the child. However, the damage will not simply go away. Mental health is just like physical health. A person could be born with a physical disability that will always require physical therapy and medication, or they could be severely harmed throughout the course of their life. Like a burn, the skin may heal, but a scar will always remain. It may hurt more on certain days. Addicts leave those scars on their children, but they are emotional. Because of a parent's actions, their child may have difficulty establishing trusting relationships, and if those relationships are established, the child may find themselves being overly emotionally responsible or doing more of the giving. Those problems can be helped by stable relationships and therapy, but are again emotional scars. When a parent is under the influence and therefore unable to properly take care of their child or children, the carelessness is reflected onto the children in two common ways: abuse, emotional, physical, or both, or neglect. It can also be a mixture of those shortcomings or something else. Both wrongdoings will negatively impact the children, but the consequences vary. The way children are treated growing up prompts their mental health and habits. When children suffer abuse, they tend to have external conflicts, such as anger, aggression, conduct, or behavioral problems. But When children are neglected, they often internalize their disputes. This is most commonly displayed by depression, anxiety, social withdrawal, or poor peer relationships. All of these disorders can be aided with therapy, stable environments, and, in some cases, some form of medication. One more form of the tragedies children suffer at the hands of parental addicts can be sexual violence. This is not as common as other types of abuse or neglect, but still just as detrimental to the child's physical, mental, and emotional well-being. A parent with a substance use disorder is 3 times as likely to physically or sexually abuse their child or children, according to the U.S. National Library of Medicine. About 2/3 of sexual violence perpetrators report using alcohol directly before the offending incident, and this ratio applies to all types of sexual abuse. The children who have suffered these violences are in turn more than 50% more likely to be arrested as juveniles and 40% more likely to commit a violent crime. A widely used and approved definition of violence against children is the intentional use of a physical force or power, threatened or actual, against oneself, another person, or against a community that either results in or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, maldevelopment, or deprivation. Prevention is essential to child protection when cases where the child has committed a crime arise. Addressing the root of the problem may create a society where child protection is always ensured and may not even be needed, which is always the goal. Diversion is also crucial because if the problem occurs, it allows for intervention that is not harmful to the child while righting their wrongs. Children's brains are always growing and learning, and a child is never born a criminal, so it is necessary to treat them kindly no matter what. Reintegration is the 3rd step of this process. It is just as important because children need a guiding hand, not a permanent punishment. Providing them with a second, educated chance ensures trust and a solid foundation for the child to start over and grow. That said, no traumas can be wiped away, merely addressed earlier. These victims will always be hurt from the memories of their suffering. The typical adult hears of the crimes committed by the addict parent and will seek to remove the child from the situation immediately. While this is the caring thought process, immediate and sudden change will do more harm than good. Any long-term separation will have a negative impact on their child's ability to attach to others and to regulate their affection for the parent. Instead, one should educate the child about their situation in age-appropriate matters. If a child is 6 years old, they should be reassured they have done nothing wrong, their parent loves them but has problems showing it, etc. However, if a child is closer to 10 years of age, one should still reassure them of the love in the household while explaining addiction a bit more in depth. By the time the adolescent is in their teens, they will be most likely aware of addiction in other settings, so while a gentle approach should always be applied, it will be easier for the child to understand their parents' shortcomings. Once the child is aware of their situation, it is crucial to constantly give them new ways to cope. An idea called optimist, realist, or something else is a beautiful way to give kids room to sort through their emotions. Presented by Simon George, the ideology differentiates between optimism and realism. Optimism is the tendency to look for the most favorable sides or conditions, or good will win. Realism is the tendency to view or represent things the way they are. For instance, we all know the phrase glass half full. That is the optimistic approach. While a realist will acknowledge the glass is half full, they will also recognize that the glass could have water added to it or that the water could be drunk. A less common example, but one more appropriate for this comparison, would be waiting for a package to arrive. An optimist would go, "I hope it comes today," or "maybe it will come tomorrow," or any other date in close proximity. Every time the package doesn't arrive within their predicted time range, they will be disappointed and lose certainty in their future estimates and, by default, themselves. A realist would say, shipping takes time, and given other variables, the package will probably arrive next week. These people are not being pessimistic, simply reasonable. Knowing when to use an optimistic approach or a realistic one with children is essential. Teaching them the truth without losing their childish spark is an extremely difficult balance, but one that must always be pursued. Canceling hope, especially that in such bright souls, is not an option. However, if the situation arises where a child must be removed, even if just temporarily, they are put into what is called alternative care. Harvard X defines alternative care as a formal or informal arrangement whereby a child is looked after at least overnight outside of the parental home. This could be due to a decision by a judicial or administrative authority or duly accredited body, or at the initiative of the child, their parents or primary caregivers, or spontaneously by a care provider in the absence of parents. Formal alternative care is care that is provided in a family environment and ordered by an authority or any form of residential care. There are two main types of formal alternative care. Family-based care, where the child lives in a family home. This includes foster care, or living with a named guardian, or living with relatives. The other option is residential care, where the child lives in a residential institution. This includes small group homes, orphanages, and other residential institutions. These can be run by the state, nonprofits, or private providers. Informal alternative care is defined as care that is privately arranged where family members or friends take care of the child without the intervention of authorities. When a child enters alternative care, a small multi-professional team assesses each case. This team generally consists of a psychologist, social worker, teacher, or whomever else is needed. When a child leaves alternative care, it is a process, not an event. The process should begin before the child leaves care and continue afterwards. There are alternative care guidelines, which state agencies and facilities should ensure appropriate aftercare and follow-up. They should aim at preparing children to assume self-reliance and integrated fully in the community. The process should take into account a child's gender, age, maturity, and circumstances, and aim to avoid exploitation of the children after they leave care. There should be a process where there is continuity for the young person. As Simon George says, acceptance is knowing that grief is a raging river, and you have to get into it, because when you do, it carries you to the next place. It eventually takes you to open land, somewhere where it will turn okay in the end. Allowing children to go through the struggles previously mentioned and more to feel the stages of grief in a safe, sheltered way will help them cope with future problems and feel secure in themselves. Because each situation they live through does create grief. These kids grow up in an environment where they often feel responsible for their parents' actions and must take over the household chores. This then results in parentified children. If there is more than one child in a family with an addict, the eldest typically cares for the younger ones because the parents cannot. But if the child is in a household without any functional parents, there is a reversal of dependence needs as a child parents the adult. The parents' needs are then set before the child's, which in turn sets the child up child up for a potential lifetime of inability to set healthy boundaries in relationships and make the important triad connections between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. A lack of self-awareness and an over-awareness of others' needs is then planted in the kids. Along with a reversal of roles, addict parents have difficulty with assertiveness and direct communication. In other words, many subjects are off limits to discuss. The children then subject to this may experience anxiety, fear, depression, guilt, shame, loneliness, confusion, anger, and often feel as though they are the ones that causes their parents' addiction, or perhaps they are expected to keep the drug use a secret from others in the family and in the community. These are all emotional failures of the parents. Abuse and neglect have been covered, but education for these children has not. Many parents that struggle with addiction had difficulty with the school system in their own school-age years and avoid interacting with it due to their own anxiety or shame. In early childhood, addict parents read less and less to their children and provide less learning-based stimulation to their infants and toddlers. In school-age years, parents are less available to provide assistance with homework, monitor school performance, and track assignments. Everyone here should be well aware of the consequences of not aiding their child with school at all. Take that damage and apply it to everything. Every interaction you've had with your kid, or if you're a teenager like me, every time you've helped siblings or friends. How many of those conversations were absolutely vital in the moment? Hopefully not many. But addict parents don't often have those little interactions or provide the built-in support for their child. In the school-age years, children whose parents are not available may have difficulty with attention and concentration due to increased anxiety related to having a chaotic home environment. They have unstructured bedtimes and mealtimes, as well as often witnessing domestic violence. All these factors, along with other safety issues, all contribute to an increase in learning and behavioral problems. It is difficult for children to focus on higher order thinking and learning when basic survival needs are not met. It is in school where adults, generally school staff, spot the signs of an unsafe home environment in their students. Social workers are often brought in at this point and assist the situation in a variety of ways. This may include providing school-based supportive services to the youth, as well as connecting the children with after-school care, tutoring services, or mentoring agencies. Social workers can also participate in individualized education plan meetings, making school referrals for special education, and requesting psychoeducational and neuropsychological testing. School and social worker approaches to child protection may vary because while most of the adults in these settings are mandatory reporters, children aren't. However, there are two rules of thumb everyone seems to agree on. All people influence their social environment and in turn are influenced by it. And the earlier the intervention, the better the outcomes for all family members. Throughout the many approaches to best help children affected by addict parents, there is only one method that will actually help, which is involving the child. Without a child's voice, adults do not know what issues they need to address. Without a child's view, adults do not know the most beneficial system to address these issues. And without providing a support system to the child, adults might not even deem the child's situation to be unsafe. Addict parents are detrimental to the children's health, but I hope I have provided enough guidelines to help children impacted by parental addicts. Thank you. 5 minutes, baby! Oh, I'm still going.